There is a moment in the grand, sweeping tapestry of human history that every citizen of the West should hold close to their heart with a sense of profound and unyielding pride. A moment when the monolithic, iron-fisted power of the Eastern Bloc was forced to stare directly into the eyes of American resolve and, for the first time in the nuclear age, was the first to blink. It was a conflict that didn't begin with the blinding flash of a missile launch or the thunder of 1,000 tanks, but with the defiant, rhythmic roar of heavy engines vibrating over a city being systematically strangled by tyranny. In the sweltering summer of the Great Siege, the Eastern Premier, Viktor Volkov, believed he had found the perfect, bloodless weapon to break the spirit of the West, a total, suffocating blockade of the divided capital. He cut every road, every rail line, and every canal, gambling everything on the cynical assumption that the United States would simply pack up its bags and walk away from millions of innocent souls. He believed that Western democracy was soft, that its people were tired of war, and that they would never find the stomach to support a city trapped deep inside enemy lines. He was catastrophically, historically wrong. What followed was the Sky Bridge Initiative, the greatest logistical miracle in the history of human warfare, a feat of organization and courage that defied the laws of physics and the expectations of every military strategist in the Kremlin. While the Eastern leadership watched from the ground in stunned, silent disbelief, American pilots, led by the legendary Colonel Cappy Sterling, began a mission of mercy that redefined the world's perception of power. For nearly a year, an American plane landed every 30 seconds, day and night, through freezing sleet and blinding fog. We didn't just bring flour and coal, we brought the very breath of hope to a people who had forgotten what freedom tasted like. We saw the birth of the Chocolate Raiders, men who dropped sweets on tiny, handmade parachutes for children who stood in the ruins of their homes. This wasn't just a military operation, it was a thunderous demonstration of American industrial might and the bottomless depth of American compassion. It was the first time the Iron Divide felt the true weight of a superpower that didn't just know how to destroy, but how to build, sustain, and protect at all costs. As the decade turned and the tension solidified into a silent war that would define the fate of the planet for generations, the conflict moved from the open, sunlit skies into the dark, eerie, and claustrophobic depths of the city's underground. The capital became a place of haunting shadows, where the hollow terminals of the metro stood as a chilling visual reminder of the fundamental divide between two vastly different civilizations. As Western trains rumbled through the dark, passengers would peer through the glass into Eastern stations that had been frozen in time. Pitch black, sandbagged fortresses manned by silent soldiers clutching rifles, their eyes peering through the slats of boarded-up windows like wardens in a giant, city-wide prison. But while the East was busy building walls of concrete and barbed wire to keep its own people from fleeing the workers' paradise, the Americans were busy planning a technological heist so audacious it sounded like something ripped from the pages of a pulp spy novel. This was Project Mercury-Eye. In a secret, high-stakes partnership with Allied intelligence, American engineers led by the visionary Arthur, the Ghost, Vance began digging a massive, high-tech tunnel hundreds of meters deep beneath the enemy sector, right under the noses of the Eastern High Command. This wasn't just a simple hole in the dirt. It was a masterpiece of mid-century American engineering, a subterranean marvel equipped with sophisticated refrigeration systems designed to keep the massive, heat-generating recording tapes from melting in the stifling underground air. For 11 glorious, tension-filled months, American technicians sat in these refrigerated rooms, listening in real time to 500,000 enemy phone calls. We heard their private military orders, their logistical secrets, and most importantly, we heard their growing fears. Even though history records a betrayal by a mole, the sheer technical brilliance of the operation sent a psychological shockwave through the Eastern Bloc that they would never truly recover from. It proved that American intelligence was operating on a digital, visionary level while their counterparts were still stuck in a world of paper files and primitive ink. It was a clear, unmistakable message: your secrets are no longer your own. They are Western property. The gap between American genius and Eastern desperation only widened as the world moved into the 1960s and 70s, a period where the contrast in lifestyles became so sharp it was impossible to ignore. While the Eastern Secret Police, under the cold, calculating eye of the mysterious director Silas Vane, was forced to rely on siren agents, operatives trained to seduce government staff because the Eastern Bloc lacked the technological infrastructure to intercept encrypted data. The United States was turning the very geography of the city against the occupiers. On top of a massive hill made of historical rubble known as Sentinel Heights, the Americans constructed a listening post that looked like a futuristic fortress from another planet. Huge silver domes housed the most advanced signals intelligence equipment ever devised by man. From that single, high-altitude point, American agents could vacuum up every radio transmission, every microwave signal, and every diplomatic whisper from the heart of the Eastern Bloc itself. This was the era of American electronic magic at its absolute zenith. Our computers were doing in mere seconds what tens of thousands of informants couldn't accomplish in a lifetime of spying. We were seeing through their walls, hearing through their wires, and anticipating their every strategic move with surgical, mathematical precision. The Eastern generals knew they were being outpaced, outthought, and out-engineered. They could feel the invisible net of American technology tightening around their throats, and they realized that no amount of secret police or concrete barriers could stop the relentless flow of information that was systematically dismantling the foundations of their empire. This technological superiority was mirrored by an even more devastating American weapon: the sheer, undeniable attractiveness of the American way of life. While the Eastern system produced breadlines, gray apartment blocks, and a culture of fear, the Western sector was a neon-lit beacon of prosperity, innovation, and consumer abundance. The enemy spent millions trying to convince their people that the West was a decaying wasteland, but every time an Eastern citizen caught a glimpse of a Western marketplace or heard a forbidden broadcast from Liberty Air, the propaganda crumbled. The Americans didn't just win because we had better tanks, we won because we had better vision for what a human life should look like. This reached a fever pitch in the 1980s when the great liberator, President Samuel the Sentinel Thorne, stood before the Great Divide and issued a challenge that echoed around the globe. It wasn't just a speech, it was the final, moral knockout blow. Thorne knew what the agents had been reporting for years. The Eastern economy was a hollow shell, a dying engine that was running on fumes while trying to compete with the high-octane output of American capitalism. The final, crushing blow to the Eastern psyche came with the announcement of the Aegis Shield, a space-based defense system that would render the entire Eastern missile arsenal completely and utterly obsolete. The enemy spent a staggering portion of its wealth in a desperate, frantic attempt to keep up with American innovation, and they still failed. They were fighting a high-tech war of the mind with brute force tactics, and the realization of their own obsolescence began to tear their system apart from the inside. The climax of this long, invisible struggle reached its symbolic peak at the Border Stone Bridge in the winter of 1985 during the most significant operative exchange in the history of the world. As the American negotiators stood tall in their well-tailored suits and dark sunglasses, looking like the confident architects of a bright and prosperous future, the Eastern officials looked like weary relics of a crumbling, gray past. The prisoners walking across that bridge, men who had survived years of isolation in brutal prisons, weren't just moving from east to west, they were moving from a world of decay and surveillance into a world of vibrant, American-led light. The look of awe on their faces as they were greeted by American officials was the ultimate validation of everything the United States had fought for since the end of the Great War. It was the moment the world saw that the Iron Divide was not an impenetrable shield, but a rusting fence that was about to fall. When the Great Wall finally crumbled into dust in the autumn of 1989, it wasn't just a victory for a specific policy, it was the final, undeniable triumph of the American spirit and the unyielding power of freedom. It proved for all time that you cannot isolate a society from the truth forever, and it proved that when the stakes are at their highest, American grit, American ingenuity, and American technology will always find a way to prevail over the forces of darkness. The Eastern Bloc had spent 40 years trying to prove to the world that their system of state control was superior, only to see their own people tear down their monuments with their bare hands the moment they were given a choice. We didn't just win the silent war because we had more bombs, we won because we had more ideas, more liberty, and a technological soul that the secret police, for all their cruelty and cunning, could never hope to replicate or understand. This is the enduring legacy of the secret war in the city. A story of how a nation of free, independent people outthought, outbuilt, and outlived a machine of cold, heartless tyranny. Today, The once dark hollow terminals are bright and full of life, and the iconic silver domes of Sentinel Heights stand as silent, wind-swept monuments to a time when America looked into the heart of the Iron Divide and decided to light it up with the fire of genius. This is why we stand proud, because when history demanded a champion for liberty, the United States didn't just show up to the fight. We led the way with a brilliance that blinded our enemies and a resolve that changed the course of human history forever. We are the architects of the modern world, the nation that proved that the light of freedom will always outshine the shadows of a police state, and as long as we remember the lessons of the silent war, that light will never be extinguished.